So I want you to remember the last time you were in a heated argument with someone you deeply care about. Maybe it was a family member, a close friend, or a coworker. You're in the middle of this conversation, voices are raised, and you are just furious. And you honestly cannot recall a single good thing this person has ever done for you. You forget the long years of history that you have in our eyes and our hearts. They just go completely dark. You can't find that memory of the time they stood with you in crisis, the generosity they've shown you, the milestones you have celebrated together. You cannot find the sound of their laughter and enjoyment or the warmth of their support. Because in that moment of rage, your feelings are too loud. Those things aren't just forgotten. It's as if they never happened. Because our current mood has staged a coup against the history of our lives. Our emotions have blinded us. We are physically and spiritually incapable in that moment of seeing the truth because the feelings of now are screaming so loud. And we do this with God all the time. It's like we've suffered a spiritual blackout when our current feelings become so loud, so overwhelming, and so aggressive that we can't see past the moment. We are stuck in this fight or flight mode. We stop seeing the big picture. We stop seeing the years of God's faithfulness that have brought us to this moment. All we see is the Tehom, the deep, the danger, the chaos of the moment. And when our feelings are raging like that, we are vulnerable to wicked counsel. And sometimes that counsel doesn't come from a person standing next to you. It comes from our own heart. Or even some spiritual oppression whispering to you, God has abandoned you. You are alone. This crisis is the only moment that matters, the only truth that matters. Everything God did before was just coincidence. He's abandoned you now. And God knows we're wired this way. He knows we are reactive. He knows we're forgetful and that we need constant reminders, constant stories of God's faithfulness. But the facts of the story are rarely enough to overcome our emotional storm. We have to remember the feeling. And poetry is a specialized tool designed to slow our hearts down, slow our emotions down long enough for our past feelings to catch up to our present feelings and the facts of the moment. Poetry helps our head and our heart remember. If you want to turn with me to Psalm 78. Psalm 78 is what scholars call a historical recital. It was written because God knows our hearts are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And if we do not remember the facts and feelings of God's history with us, we will drift away every time our bank accounts get low, every time our health falters, every time our heart aches. Remembering is God's way of making an old miracle a present fortress because our hearts lie, but the story doesn't. Psalm 78 is remembering the Exodus. God rescues Israel from 400 years of slavery. He splits the Red Sea. He leads them through the wilderness with a pillar of fire. And the adrenaline wears off, and they hit the desert. And in Exodus 16, they say, "Oh, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by meat pots and ate bread to the full." Think about the sheer ridiculousness of that statement. They are remembering Egypt, the place where their infant children were murdered, where their backs were whipped, and they're remembering it as a place of full bellies and meat pots. Their current hunger and feeling is rewriting their history. They've created a false memory of a golden age that never existed because their current mood is miserable. Their feelings were distorting the facts. Because when we communicate, when we consider facts, there is no such thing as just the facts. In our modern world of scientific verification, we think there should be the facts that we can all agree on. How does that go in our culture today? Every person in this room is wealthy. You are in the top 3% of wealthy people in the world. And that's a fact. Do you feel wealthy? The facts are always interpreted through our emotions. And when remembering the facts of the past, they arrive filtered through whatever we're feeling right now. And what we're feeling in the present is pain and grief and anger. Those feelings don't just color the present, they reach back into the past and recolor everything. They make old captivity look like a feast. They make God's faithfulness look too weak to handle what you're experiencing right now. I mean, Moses, I know that God brought the plagues and protected us from them. I know our children were killed. I know we walked on dry land and the Egyptian army was destroyed, but now I'm hungry. What have you done for me lately? And so God provides manna in the wilderness. And in Exodus 17, as this bread from the sky is arriving daily, miraculously, undeniably, now they're thirsty. And if you read through Exodus 17, they wind up saying, "Is Yahweh among us?" Now meditate on that for a second. A group of slaves was just delivered from the most powerful nature in the world through displays of Yahweh's awesome power over every aspect of creation. They were aimed at the Egyptian gods, poking them in the eye and saying, "No, I'm stronger." They're eating bread that fell from the sky that morning. And they're asking, is God among them? Their mood had more authority than their memory. Their current thirst had more say over their theology than everything God had already done. They're standing in the evidence of his power. Manna showing up and asking if he is powerful. Have you ever felt that way? Our hearts lie, but our story doesn't. Psalm 78 is a response to this exact failure. It carries a word at the top of it. Before verse 1, it's a maskil. It's a teaching poem. The poet is not here trying to produce a timeline. He's not handing Israel facts to memorize. They already know the story. He's trying to help the next generations feel the weight of what God did, because he knows the facts without the feelings will not hold a heart together when the pressure comes. In verse 1, "O my people, listen to my instructions. Open your ears to what I am saying, for I will speak to you in parable. I will teach hidden lessons from our past, stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of Yahweh, about his power and his mighty wonders." This stirs an emotion in me that just thinking about the facts does not do. This is not memorize those dates and facts. This is, there's a quiz on Friday, pass it. It's causing me to imagine like a dark room with the fire casting shifting shadows on a hooded storyteller about to let me in on the secret. Lean in close. There's some wisdom here. Hidden lessons, stories handed down by our ancestors, glorious deeds of power and might. The poet is building a fortress for our present struggle out of the old stories of God's faithfulness. Verse 16, he gives some of the detail. He made streams come out of the rocks and caused waters to flow down like rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. They tested God in their heart by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the wilderness?" He struck the rock so that water gushed out and streams overflowed. Can he also give bread or provide meat for his people? Now, if you're thinking just about the facts, wait a minute. I thought the manna was first and then the water was second. Contradiction. The Bible is full of lies. We can't trust it. No. We present facts based on how we want the audience to react, what we're trying to communicate, and we do this all the time. Do you want the good news first or the bad news first? The doctor who wants to fill you with hope, he brings up all the negative tests, all the things that you don't have to prepare you for the revelation of the illness you have. Or the other doctor that likes to knock you down first. Let me tell you where we're at. Okay, now let me, as you sit in the grief and the shock, let me build you up through all of these negative tests. Let me build you up through the power of the treatment and the positive results that you will experience. Both doctors have the same facts. They don't change because you choose to express them differently. What are you trying to communicate? What is the psalmist trying to communicate? Do you think he forgot the order the events happened in? Using parallelism, putting two ideas together, the poet wants us to slow down and think about the differences. Line A, and what's more, line B. In line A, he is conceding the impossible, water gushing out of a rock. In line B, he's pointing out their response. The impossible isn't enough. Even while the miracle is happening, their hunger overrules the miracle. Even while they drink the water God produced from the stone, their appetite demands a different miracle and doubts that he can even do it. The poet is looking back at their complaining and saying they were eating the food of angels and complaining that the menu in the slave camp was better. The poet is revealing that our complaints are often not about our lack of provision, but our lack of perspective. We treat angels' bread like trash because it doesn't taste like the meat pots of our old captivity. We confuse the familiarity of our bondage to sin with the goodness that God is offering. In verse 15, the poet is going to use loaded languages to heighten the drama. In verse 15, he describes the water using the word Tehom, the deep. Tehom is the word for that chaos, the primordial waters. The poet is deliberately connecting the wilderness that they are in now to the creation story. He's saying the same God who tamed the chaotic waters of the deep at the beginning of time is giving you water to drink in the middle of the desert. Have you forgotten our story together? Have you forgotten what he has been doing since the beginning? This forgetting is not unique to ancient Israel. This is every person in this room who has prayed help, received it, and then 3 weeks later asked God, what have you done for me lately? I'm hurting again. Why don't you show up now in the way that I want? The feelings are not lying to us about the pain. The pain is real. The hunger is real. The thirst is real. But the feelings are lying about who God is and how he will respond. The feelings are yelling at us that this current crisis is evidence that the past miracles don't count unless he shows up now. And that is the lie. Remembering is God's way of making an old miracle a present rock. And how often do we stand in the middle of a rock, in the middle of a miracle, a roof over our heads, breath in our lungs, a church community that loves us and says, yes, but can he fix my current problem? Our hearts lie, but our story doesn't. And the poet, as he used that Tehom word, he uses more repeated words a lot in this psalm that act as blue hyperlinks to remind us of other stories. And I'm going to pull 4 out right now. And the first is Pala, and it means wonder or marvelous work in verse 4. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation of the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the Pala that he has done. In the Bible, a Pala is something that is surpassing or extraordinary. It's something that should leave you speechless. Like, I don't know, parting a sea and destroying a mighty army, like raining down bread from heaven and bringing water forth from a rock. God is the God of Palah. He is constantly doing things in our lives that are statistically impossible, but we have a way of normalizing them. Normalizing his protection and blessing until it feels mundane. We turn the blessing of God's regular Palah in our lives into this is just how things are. And as a matter of fact, I think I deserve it. I expect it. In fact, I think I even expect more and deserve more. We use the miracles of the past as a floor to stand on while we shout our doubts at God. We treat God's grace as a given and his next provision as a gamble because we have shakakt. We translate it as forget. But the sense is more deliberate than that. It's I ignore. I choose not to remember. I willfully look away. In verse 11, they shakak his work and they palah that he has shown them. The wonders are still there. The evidence was still real, but their feelings were too loud. They chose to let their feelings define the facts, and they chose to reject Yahweh's past faithfulness. They let the Tehom, the chaos of their emotions, drown out the Palah that has been happening in their history with Yahweh. And the answer to forgetting, the answer to shakak is not willpower. The answer is Zakar. And we translate this one, remember. But again, that translation is too thin. Because in English, we think of remembering as a mental exercise. Recall something stored somewhere. Remember the dates, remember the events, remember who was there, pass the quiz, move on. But in Hebrew, Zakar is active. It has weight. It's demanding something. When God remembers, when he Zakars his covenant in Scripture, he acts on it. When Israel remembers God, they're aligning their current behavior with history. Zakar is the deliberate act of dragging a past story into a present crisis and saying to your own emotions, you don't get to ignore this. I will focus, I will remember the great wonders God has done, his faithfulness. In verse 35, they Zakar, they remembered that God was their rock. The Most High God was their Redeemer. He had bought them and freed them. And there is the fourth word, the thing that they remembered when they finally remembered. God is our sur, our rock. They Zakar that God was their sur, the Most High, their Redeemer. The word sur shows up 3 times in this psalm, as the poet is building this metaphor, this idea for how he wants us to connect. In verse 15, it says, he split the sur in the wilderness and gave them drink abundantly as from the Tehom. Now, this is a meditation moment. You will likely miss it on your first reading, on your 15th reading, on your 50th reading. That's fine. That is what poetry does. It plants, and it's patient, and it waits. And sometimes you need to have the same thing happen to me that happens to you, where I have somebody point it out to me and I go, oh my goodness, I missed that. In verse 15, the sur is just a rock, the kind of thing you use for a foundation. It's strong and unmoving, unyielding, constant, but it's connected to Tehom, the primordial chaos, because it doesn't give life. You can't get bread from a stone. You can't get water from a stone. It's unordered. And so it's connected to the Tehom. But in verse 20, we see that he struck the sur. So now Mayim gushed out and streams overflowed. It's the same rock, the same physical object, the same density, the same weight, the same unyielding mass. But now it has life-giving water, Mayim, pouring from it because God has acted on it. God has ordered what was inert. What could not give life is now a source of it. The sur is now strong and unmoving and unyielding and constant and safe and a blessing and life-giving. The poet plants all of that to help us meditate on what God is like, that God is our sur. That third time he uses it, that God is strong and unmoving, unyielding, constant, safe, a blessing, a life giver. And this word sur would have been a blue hyperlink. It would have caused the Israelites to Zakar, to remember Deuteronomy 32. The sur, his work is perfect. All of his ways are mishpat, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. Deuteronomy 32 is the last poem Moses ever writes. He is standing at the edge of his death, and he's not writing a eulogy. He's building a fortress. Deuteronomy 32 recounts God's faithfulness. It names every act of rebellion. Every time the Israelites rejected God and questioned at the rock, questioned about the food, failed to follow. And he hands the Israelites this one word, sur, as a handle for everything that God has been and will be, that despite our wanderings and our rejections and our rebellions and our emotions that are driving us everywhere, God is the sur, the safe rock upon which we can depend. And Moses tells them what to do with this idea. As Moses came and recited all the words of the song in the hearing of the people, he and Joshua the son of Nun, and when Moses had finished speaking all these words to all of Israel, that would be all of Deuteronomy 32, his poem he just wrote, he said to them, take to heart all the words by which I am warning you today, that you may command them to your children, that you may be careful to do all the words of this law. For it is no empty word for you, but your very life. And by this word you shall live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess. Your very life. Not a tradition, not a religious exercise. The story of God's faithfulness is your very life. And Psalm 78 opened the same way. As we meditated and we read it again and repeat these sections during our lives, we see that the echo here is intentional. Repeat them to your children. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. It's the same word that Moses said, teach this to your children, this teaching. Incline your ears to the word of my mouth. I will open my mouth in parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us, that Moses wrote down for our fathers to teach us every generation. It's not new information. It's remembering the story. We will not hide them from our children, but will tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders he has done. And in the middle of that story was all the times we failed. It's not just the good parts. It's one of the things that makes the Bible incredible, is it shares all the failures and contrasts it with the faithfulness of God, because he established a testimony in Jacob. He appointed a law and instruction in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, the testimony of his faithfulness and our unfaithfulness. He established it that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. I have no greater joy in my life than when I look at my children and I see them doing better than me. Be better than me. And that is the heart cry of Psalm 78. Teach your children. Teach them your failures. Teach them your successes so they're not like me. God does the palah, the impossible wonders. And we choose not to forget it. We let the noise right now drown it out. We choose to ignore it. So we must zakar. We have to drag that story back forward. We have to say it out loud. We have to say it in our hearts. We have to be brave enough, as Lauren was, to say it out loud and share it with others so that it can be an encouragement and a reminder say it to our children, because the object of our memory is the Sur, is Yahweh, the rock, strong, unmoving, life-giving, faithful, and remains faithful, does not stop giving life just because our feelings get loud, just because we rebel. Our hearts lie all the time, but the story doesn't. Meditate on that. Call to mind right now the hardest thing you have ever experienced. The most pain, the most anger or grief, that sense of injustice. It's often not far from our thoughts. It pops to mind real quick. And often those emotions start stirring. You are still here. God sustained you through that. He will sustain you today. And He will do it despite our doubts, despite our unfaithfulness. In the middle of Psalm 78, the poet recounts the failures and the rebellions of the people. The times they forgot the wonders, the times they turned to other gods or nations or themselves, rejecting the safety of God the rock, God the fortress. He remembers the defeated Egyptians and the freed Israelites. He remembers that God led the Israelites as a shepherd into the promised land, and they rejected Him again. We see echoes of Judges when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. We see the failure of Saul, the splitting of the kingdom after the death of Solomon. All of this occurred because the nation forgot. And Psalm 78 says, in spite of all of this, despite of all the wonders, they still sinned. Despite His palah, they did not believe. This is what it looks like when we let our mood win. We become people who are standing in our story of God's repeated faithfulness and still refuse to trust. We try it again our own way and then get mad at Him when we fail. We reject the angel's bread that He offers us, thinking that the meat pots of our bondage is better. And yet, the psalm doesn't end there. In verse 37, their heart was not steadfast towards Him. They were not faithful to His covenant. Yet He, being compassionate, atoned for their iniquity and did not destroy them. He restrained His anger often. I know He does the same for me. He did not stir up all of His wrath. He Zakar, God Zakar. He brought to mind and focused on the fact that we are but flesh, a wind that passes and comes not again. With our emotions, He knows that we are unfaithful. And so He is faithful even when we are not. He stepped off His throne to be faithful for us because we will not be. When we gather for worship, when we take communion, when we sing these songs, we're not just trying to think about the past. We are practicing Zakar. We are stacking the stones of God's faithfulness, of our story with Him. So when the flood of feelings come, we have a place to stand that is higher than the waves. We are building a present fortress of our old stories, of the cross and His sacrifice, His willingness to be faithful in our place. The last few years of my life have brought the greatest pain and hardship I have endured. I could have surrendered to the pain. I could have rejected the story God has brought me through. But I had a rock. I had a God who reminded me over and over and over again of all the times He had been faithful. Eli's brain surgery, the car accident, leaving my job, all the stories were evidence that God has always been faithful. Grayson's surgery, the blessing of my wife with her health, the financial blessing He's brought us to. He's so faithful, but I had to Zakar. I had to physically speak to my heart that no, this is not true. God is faithful. No, this is not all of there is. No, I will not stay in this emotional place. Yes, there is hope. Yes, God is faithful. Yes, I may not understand, but God is working all things for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And that is me right now in the middle of my pain. And that is you right now in the middle of your pain. If you don't have your own rock, your own fortress built up yet, I offer you mine. Borrow my sword, borrow my stories, borrow Lauren's stories, borrow the stories of the Old Testament, the story of the empty tomb, the stories of the church past and present, including the stories of the people in this room. Let those wonders, those palas, be the roof over your head as you walk with God and build your own story. If you have stories when God did great palas, great wonders in your life, share them. Let others borrow your stories as they build their faith. Be a blessing, as Lauren was a blessing this morning. This week, I encourage you, tell one person one God story. Not a sermon. You don't have to give them all the detail. But that time where God showed up in your life. Write it down if you need to. Maybe you just share it at dinner with your family. Maybe you text it to someone that you know is struggling. That is the Zakar in action. That is bringing the story, remembering it, focusing on it, and letting it define our realities. That is us refusing to forget the wonders. Remembering is God's way of making an old story a present fortress, because our hearts lie, but our story with God doesn't. He is faithful. If you'll stand with me. This is a moment of our Zakar, a moment where we remember who provides for us with our daily bread and the power for all that we do. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.